Thanks for joining. I know this is a holiday week, such as it is for many, so thanks for taking the time out to join us. This is Lisa Letourneau. I'm a senior advisor with Maine DHHS. I'm here with the real expert, Dr. Stephen Sears from Maine CDC, and several other fantastic clinicians from our clinical outreach advisory work group, and I'm going to invite all of them to join in and help provide answers to questions, and all of you bring your own expertise as well. So we fully acknowledge that we are learning as we go on this, and a lot of the answers are still being determined. So it is 7:32. Amy, if you could, we're going to record this. So if anybody does not want to be on a recorded session, feel free to jump off. But with that, I'm going to jump in, share my screen. We're going to share a few brief slides. We heard input from many who would like more time for questions, so we're going to try to do that. But as mentioned, this is one of our ongoing clinical info sessions for learning about the emerging COVID vaccines. A very exciting time in this dark period. We are offering, with the very gracious help of the Maine Medical Association, 0.5 hours of continuing medical education credit, category 1. If you want CME, this is specifically for physicians, but others can find this certificate useful. You just need to enter your name and email address in the chat. We are going to come up with a different method. I know it's kind of messy in the chat, so we're going to be doing a different thing by next week, but for this week, still name and email. We need both of those things, not just one, both your name and your email. And you do get half an hour for each time, even though we do repeat some information in these sessions. There's new information each time. Neither Dr. Sears nor I, or Dr. Madden, one of the planners, have any commercial interests. As mentioned, we try to hit on different information each time, though there's bound to be some overlap. The first several, we focused on the science of the vaccines and the development process. We're going to shift gears a little bit more this time to talk a little bit more about the distribution planning and prioritization. Though I don't have a lot of final answers on that, talk a little bit about the safety and some of the questions that come up often. So just to start on that first issue of the prioritization, many of you have likely seen by now the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, has put out their recommendations to the US CDC. Maine CDC, Maine DHHS has largely agreed to follow those and will be putting out more information, I think even this week and then over time, on how we continue the distribution through these phases. So right now it really started on phase 1A, the highest subgroup of that first group of healthcare personnel, meaning front-facing, patient-facing clinical staff in the highest risk units of ICU, ED, and COVID units, although now as hospitals and health systems
You're muted,
there we
Lisa.
go. Yeah. I think I need to get out of this. Shoot. Shoot.
While Lisa's trying to get that together, she said it is a pretty exciting time. We have 2 mRNA vaccines. Okay, you're back to what you want to say. Anything else you wanted to say on that, Lisa?
Oh, there we go. Oh, sorry. Yeah, just that we will be, so DHHS, CDC leadership are meeting regularly and will be getting more information out in terms of next distribution of vaccine in this healthcare personnel. Certainly the residents of long-term care, that is ongoing through a federal pharmacy partnership with CVS and Walgreens. They are getting vaccine out into long-term care facilities. But the big questions clearly have come from many of you and others about where am I in the healthcare personnel phase 1A before we get to these other 2 big phases. One of the big issues, as you can see here, is there's a lot of people in this category. Even when you take out long-term care, it's close to 100,000 for healthcare personnel. So while we have not had enough vaccine yet, the good news is we will anticipate it over the next several weeks. And again, there will be more information coming out from this office, I'm hopeful even maybe later this week, about how we continue to advance the distribution within healthcare personnel. So we won't have more answers for you on this call, unfortunately, It will be coming soon, and the intention absolutely, and we think the supply will be to get to all of healthcare personnel over the next probably 3 to 5 weeks or so. So it's not, it's when, as Dr. Shah has said frequently. And with that, back to you, Stephen. I'm going to go back to the screen. Here we go.
Great. Sorry. So very quickly, I'll just go through sort of what we know, and I think we've gone through this before. We really have tremendous excitement around these vaccines. It is an mRNA vaccine. It basically uses our cellular, machinery to create a protein, which is the spike protein. It is then pushed out into our cytoplasm. It is then, and the immune response is against the spike protein, and it's really fairly specific. We have also found that having a good immune response to spike is what gives us good immunity overall. It has been tested rigorously. We all heard that this seemed like a rushed process. It's just been the same process we usually do, except done in a continuous way. So we had phase 1, 2, and 3 sort of almost ongoing at the same time. It's new to have a vaccine of mRNA, but it's not unknown technology. It's been around for at least 15 plus years. There's been a lot of research on it, and there's been other vaccines that have been made. They just haven't been licensed. There was one against Ebola, one against Zika, some others that are in process. It is not a live virus. It is a little chunk of mRNA. It goes into our cell. It as our ribosomes produce proteins, so it doesn't go into the it doesn't go into our nucleus. It is not DNA, and it doesn't have anything to do with the genetic code. Once it's done made its protein, it kind of dissolves. It's very unstable, and it just kind of basically falls apart. There are 2 vaccines. We've all heard about them, Pfizer and Moderna. They are remarkably similar. Here's the differences. There was a slightly, more people in the Pfizer trial, but 30,000 is still pretty adequate overall. They have the same side effect profile. The Pfizer is given at 3 weeks for a booster dose, the Moderna for 28 days. The trials were done in 16 and over in Pfizer, 18 and older in Moderna, so therefore the indications are different. The biggest one we've all heard about, the Pfizer needs to be stored in a -70 freezer, which is because it will deteriorate. The Moderna can be in a regular freezer overall, and you can keep it in a refrigerator for a longer period of time. And that's just because the product is a little more stable. These are safe vaccines. We are learning more about them.
I think Steve is frozen.
Okay, I thought it was me. So I will jump back in, and when Steve is back, good thing we have 2 of us.
Did you mute me?
No. See, the same thing happened to me. Nope. Go ahead, Steve. I think you're just unstable, Steve. We're not seeing you now either. So until you can start talking again, I'm going to keep going. So one of the big issues, as people have seen in the news, is the concern about allergic reactions. And it has happened now. I think as of last week, we had heard there were 8 that had been reported nationally, including 1 right here in southern Maine. So the risk seems to be greatest for people who have a history of severe allergic reaction to medications particularly. And because of that, the expectation now is that the vaccine be administered in some sort of clinical setting where there is immediate access to treatment for anaphylactic reaction, and that everybody should be observed for at least 15 minutes, and anybody with a history of anaphylaxis for 30 minutes. I believe most of the reactions that have occurred so far are in people with a known history who actually carry their own EpiPen. So, not just a minor itching, but some significant concerns here. There, however, is not a contraindication to actually getting the vaccine. You vaccinated? No? Unless you have a history of severe allergic reaction to an actual component of, this one says Pfizer, but now to either one. Otherwise, it's okay to give it. With this caution about observation, there is a link here, all the links in this PowerPoint, which we'll post to the website. I'll show you in just a minute, are live, so you can look for more info if interested. But if somebody has had an allergic anaphylactic reaction to the first dose, then they should not be generally advised to get the second dose. There is, again, more information on the US CDC website here, including the supplies that should be kept on site and care that should be available in places where vaccine is given. We also have been hearing a lot of questions in these. So this is, I think, our fourth or so info session. And I wanted to address some of these up front before we then jump into the Q&A section of the call. Though it would be great if any of my colleagues are prepared to unmute and help address some of these. I don't know, we've got Peggy Penoyer, an immunologist in Portland, who's on our group. I cannot see the whole group right now to know if Peggy is on. There's often been a question about these initial.
I think Peggy is on.
Great. So Peggy, it would be great if you take this one. Do the vaccines carry a risk of triggering an autoimmune response? That for some reason that has really been a concern and question that's come up frequently.
Lisa, this is Peggy Benoit. I'm not sure that we have any data on that, but this doesn't yet have any known associations. That's, I think, all we have.
Sure. Okay. So, and I don't,
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes. Hello, Dr. Sears. But now we can't. I think it's maybe your connection, Steve. It's a windy day out there. I don't know if it's moving around your wires at the lake, but I'm not hearing anything. I'm going to keep going. Can pregnant and or lactating women be vaccinated? And the answer is, again, there's not any hard data on this. Pregnant women were excluded from the trials, but because women can sometimes be pregnant, when they enter a trial without knowing it, they ended up with some pregnant women in the trials, and there's no known data about adverse outcomes, but the numbers were too small. So right now, the recommendation from the CDC is there's not a hard contraindication to vaccinating pregnant and or lactating women, but they should be fully informed of the fact that this issue has not been fully studied and of the potential for risks anytime somebody receives substances during a pregnancy. So there is a great explanation that Jim Jarvis shared from Northern Light Health that they've included in information that they share with their vaccinators, and we could share that. I don't know that we've posted that yet. But we could do that to the website. He's given us permission to share it. And Steve, anytime you're there or others, feel free to jump back in. Okay. It's in and out, Steve. We barely hear you, and then you're gone again. But keep trying. You might shut down anything else you have that's open.
Shut off your video, see if that helps.
Yeah. Can or should people who have had COVID be vaccinated, or how long afterwards? And the answer is yes, that people who have had COVID should be vaccinated. The only recommendation is to, in terms of timing, is that they shouldn't be vaccinated during the time of their acute illness. But really any time after that, after they finish their isolation period in terms of exposure to others, it is okay and recommended that they be vaccinated. There is some information out there that if vaccine is scarce and you're trying to prioritize, that people who have had COVID are likely to still have antibodies for a 90-day period afterwards. So you might just, push them a little later in the line if you need to, but it's not, it's not from a medical standpoint, you don't need to, other than if they've been treated with the recombinant antibody treatments such as bamlanivimab or Regeneron, in which case you should wait 90 days after that. Then should people with a history of allergic reaction or anaphylaxis be pre-medicated? Peggy, I'm going to turn this one back to you.
Again, I think that the data in anaphylaxis, there's no benefit for pre-medication in people who are IgE-mediated allergic reactions. So only in things that aren't IgE-mediated, like contrast. So you might even mask a reaction by giving an antihistamine prophylactically. There's just no data to support it. So they should just go in with their EpiPen and be monitored as we're doing for a half hour. No,
Great.
no pre-medication.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, I'm just going to keep going and we'll open it up to questions here. So feel free to chat or unmute yourself. We have in these slide sets links to many other resources. There are a whole lot of them from US CDC, and then on the Maine CDC COVID vaccine website. There is a little entry point for information about these sessions, as well as if you're interested in becoming a vaccine provider. There's links to the various forms and steps that you need to go through. Though there is a lot of other work entailed with that. So I would say if you are not currently a vaccine provider as your own practice, you might want to figure out who you know who is in terms of either your own provider or an affiliation with somebody, because that's probably going to be the easier route. But if you click on that yellow circle, you'll get to a recording of these sessions, as well as the resources that are posted, and including the PowerPoint. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and we'll go to questions. I would invite anybody to jump in here with answers. So again, because I couldn't see the chat, I'll ask
One is,
any of our
why is one a 3-week follow-up and one's a 4-week follow-up on the second dose? And does that make one better than the other?
it's what was done in the studies. Who'd like to jump into that? Peggy, or we have anybody else from our clinical group? I don't think there's any evidence to say it makes one better than the other. It's how the studies were set up.
That's the same that I've heard, Lisa. I don't know if there's any. At what point the vaccine rollout will travel, masking, and social distancing recommendations be modified?
Not for a good long time. So I think that's a really key message for all of us and the public and all of your patients, that it is going to take quite a long time. First of all, just to get anybody vaccinated who wants to be vaccinated. This, if you do the numbers, right, with millions and millions of people across the country, this is just going to take months. And it's often said, it will likely be even summer before the general public will be able to get access to vaccine. So number one, the numbers of people vaccinated, it's just going to take a while. And second, we don't really, we have those 2 studies which had remarkable efficacy, but they were with 30,000 and 44,000 people. We don't really know the performance in real life across millions of people. And we don't even know for certain if creating an autoimmune response will mean that you absolutely can't still, when you contract it, potentially pass it to others. So that is still going to be the recommendation for quite a while. Anybody want to add to that?
The next one may be for Dr. Panoia. Can people who are excluded to the flu shot, i.e. people who've had Guillain-Barré, eligible for the shot? Are there any exclusions?
Peggy Panoyer, the Guillain-Barré does not appear to be an exclusion, and so they're recommending people even who have had GBS to go ahead and get the vaccine.
Next one is, where do we think we need to be in terms of vaccine targets to get herd immunity?
Shifting target. Ask Dr. Fauci, right?
I think he's at 80% right now, but I've seen it as high as 90.
Right. So, we hear in other conversations to 60 to 70% because of the high level of infectivity of this virus and other issues. Yes, it's people have said 80 and maybe even higher. So it's hard to know.
So there's questions about the residential care program. Lisa, they wanted you to go back to the slide around the groups. And I think the question is, some of the long-term care and congregate care settings are hearing from Walgreens and CVS that they can no longer sign up. They don't have any more spots in the state. This may be more of a question for Tanya and the Maine immunizations program. And the other is around the children's mental health residential facilities. How do they get on the vaccine distribution for congregate care?
So you're right, Amy, that it probably is a good question for Tanya. And there is at the end of this presentation, I'm going to go back up to this slide set. So you can send questions about vaccine directly to the Maine immunization program at the C19 vaccine.mecdc@maine.gov, right here at the bottom of this slide. But in terms of the sort of prioritization of distribution, long-term care right now, the way ACIP defined that is really um, skilled nursing facilities, assisted living facilities, and nursing homes. And you know, different states have applied these things differently, and it's possible that other recommendations will come out from Maine DHHS and Maine CDC. But right now, we've been following the national ACIP guidelines, so it's not, you know, it doesn't really call out congregate specifically here, other than when people then in phase 1B, if older adults are living in congregate housing that are not, you know, covered by the long-term care facilities, or then individuals with high-risk medical conditions in phase 1C. I don't know, Steve, if
Well,
you're.
this is Mallory Shaughnessy with the Alliance for Addiction and Mental Health Services. Hi, Lisa. That question was for me, and we have had many outbreaks in residential facilities for mental health treatment and substance use treatment. We've had many outbreaks among staff and some residents, but we're not getting on those lists, even though they're a very high risk. And when you have a mental health residential facility, many of the residents who live there are eligible to go back into the community. They have some part-time jobs. They are required to be masking, but they are not necessarily adhering to that, and they have rights to go out into the community. And so putting staff there at risk, but they're not on a high priority health care 1A list that we can find. And even with children's residential, same thing, we've had many outbreaks, but those staff are not on those lists yet.
Yeah.
And we're concerned of where they're going to fall into this 1A. They are on the front lines. We also have people doing assertive community treatment in the community, providing one-on-one face-to-face treatment and providing medications, et cetera, in the community with folks who are severely mentally ill.
Mhm.
And they're not on that 1A list someplace
Yeah.
that we can find.
Right. So again, you know, I'm unfortunately not going to be able to get too far into the details
Right.
on this, but I will say that more information will be coming soon, and I do think it will be a fairly broad definition of people who are working face to face. You know, if you read the ACIP and then the other, I'm going to forget the other acronym. Definition of it's really health and public health workers who are direct face-to-face
Yep.
contact with individuals. So I think there will be opportunities there.
Okay. We're just not sure
Okay.
where to find out when that's going to happen, or if there's a place to find that out.
Yeah, so I'm hopeful that there will be more information out as early as this week or next week at the latest.
Thanks.
Okay.
mRNA vaccines have been studied for decades. Why have we never utilized a vaccine developed in this way? Why were the Zika and Ebola vaccines not passed? I think Dr. Sears is back on.
Well, yes, I am. I've been plugging it in and unplugging it in. Sorry about that. Why weren't the other vaccines gone forward? Actually, because in the case of Ebola, they produced a vaccine with an adenovirus vector, which got to market quicker and had more clinical data. So that's actually what's used. It's actually very similar to the AstraZeneca vaccine. So, I mean, I say that because all of these are new vaccine processes, mRNA as well as the adenovirus vaccines, but they've been studied for a long time. Again, this, I don't want to sugarcoat it. This is the first time we've used an mRNA vaccine, but the concept is really pretty sound. And you know, I think there was a question about side effects. You know, whenever a vaccine is released, side effects are continually gathered through phase 4 trial data gathering, as well as through the, what's called a VAERS. Anything that's that looks like a potential side effect, all of us need to input that information into the VAERS program, which I think Lisa's had at the back of her trial. So for instance, we've seen 2, maybe 3 anaphylactic or close to anaphylactic reactions. That information has been put into the federal system, and we'll continue to gather data as this goes along.
I think maybe at one of the upcoming sessions, Steve, we can talk more about the post trial safety monitoring mechanisms that are
Yeah,
out
that'd
there.
be great. That'd be
Yeah.
great.
If someone's had swelling of the arm, not just site of injection from a tetanus vaccine, are they able to still get the shot?
That broke up a little bit, Amy. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
If people have, what did you say?
Someone who's
Redness?
had a reaction to tetanus, whole swelling of the arm, are they still able to get this vaccine?
Yes, they are. These are different vaccines. Most people who get this vaccine get a sore arm. Some significant number get some swelling. And then we have some who get more, we'll call a systemic reaction with aches, pains, myalgias, headache, and such overall. But it's really not related in any way to other vaccines, other than it's going to create an immune response, and our body's going to, react to that. And that's a lot of what we're seeing as far as the side effect profile.
And if I could just chime in behind that, Steve,
Yeah.
I think as clinicians, everybody needs to be prepared that for the first round of Pfizer people who get their second shot next week, right? I think the very first ones will get their second shot. You're much more likely to see the reactogenicity after the second shot. So I think the first round went pretty well in terms of not that many people complaining, right, of soreness or achiness or even low-grade fever, but it is entirely possible you'll see a whole crop of new ones next week.
Correct. Somebody's asking about the AstraZeneca and the Johnson & Johnson. We don't really know the exact timeline. It's predicted that AstraZeneca will have enough individuals in their trial to have data to submit to the FDA in January. They're still collecting information, as is Johnson & Johnson. Those are viral vector vaccines. It's very different than an mRNA, but having said that, it's doing the same thing. It is presenting to our body a spike protein so that we can react to it immunologically and create an immune response against that, because the spike is what binds to our cells to have the virus taken up, which then starts the disease process.
There's several questions about Bell's palsy. Maybe we could grab those and then we're
Sure,
going to have to sign
sure.
off.
There were in the Kathy, please. I'm sorry. There were Bell's palsy as observed occurrences in both the Moderna and the Pfizer trial. There were 4 cases of Bell's palsy. They were in the vaccine side in Pfizer. There were 3 in the vaccine side and 1 in the placebo side in the Moderna. These are all at the same background rate that we've seen Bell's palsy in the population. So at the moment, again, that's one of those things that we need to continue to monitor and collect information. But the background rate of Bell's palsy is reasonably significant. And so if you take 70,000 people, those are the numbers that you're going to expect. So more to come.
Right. So with that, it's 8 o'clock. We have tried to keep these sessions short to recognize that you all have busy days and likely need to get to your next thing. So thank you all for joining. We will be ending. We are holding these sessions twice a week, as you've probably seen, 7:30 on Tuesdays and 12 noon on Fridays. But we run into another holiday, so no session this Friday. But we'll be back again next Tuesday, again trying to advance the info. We will leave the line open for a bit if anybody hasn't had a chance to add your name and email address if you want CME credit.
Yep.
For
Can
those
I
on
just
the
add
phone,
one other thing, Lisa?
yeah, just because those on the
Sure.
phone can't read. So if you're on the phone and haven't been able to do it, please send an email to sabrina.l.bean with an E at maine.gov, sabrina.l.bean at maine.gov, or you can always send it to me and I can forward it along if needed. Yes, Steve.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that, we have gotten a fair amount of vaccine, not nearly as much as we expected, but the vaccine is being delivered. About 17,000 doses so far have been delivered in the state. And the goal, obviously, is as soon as we get it, is to get it out. And all of these questions about distribution are really hopefully going to be answered either, as Lisa said, this week or in the beginning of next week, given the holidays. But there's a lot of people really listening to everybody's comments and trying to develop a strategy to get vaccine to all those who need it.
Great. All right. So lots of great suggestions in the chat. Thanks everybody for adding the links. We will try to get to more questions next time. And thanks all for joining. Thanks for all your efforts. Stay safe and best wishes for a better 2021. See you then. Thanks. Amy, if you want to stop recording.